In this episode, we share more stories of successful professionals who made a mid career pivot into entrepreneurship. Let's get started.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, it's the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. Negotiating compensation, purchasing your first investment property, helping your family with money, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. New money brings new problems that require new solutions. Join us as we work through them together. I'm Brenton Harrison, and this is the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Hello, my name is Brenton Harrison of New Money, New Problems, and your host for the New Money, New Problems podcast. If you've been with us over the past month and a half, you know we've been in the middle of a series that we took a quick pause on, where we highlighted the ways that you can do a mid-career pivot from your current industry into entrepreneurship. And in this episode, what I wanted to do to finish off and put a bow on this series is share some stories from several friends of mine who have done just what we're talking about. They have left industries either permanently or temporarily where they had some level of success and they, for some reason or another, started or bought or became a franchisee of a business. And while we're sharing snippets of each of these interviews, we actually talked to each of these people for about 20 minutes. And they shared some really great insights on where they were mentally and emotionally at the time. For the married couples, even talked about, the conversations between them and their spouse before they made the pivot. We didn't want to have an episode that was like an hour and a half long. So we have condensed some of these interviews down a little bit to share some of the key answers that kind of go across all of the different interviews. But if you want to hear the full unreleased version, which I think you really, really would enjoy, you can go to newmoneynewproblems.com/pivot, and you will be able to access the full video of the unedited version. So newmoneynewproblems.com/pivot for the full unreleased version. These are some snippets that we think would be helpful for those who want a more condensed version. We're going to start off with my friend Reggie Coopwood of Refresh and Etc. Reggie is one of three people on this episode who I have quite literally known, if not my entire life, almost my entire life. We grew up together, went to elementary school together, high school together, college together, and Reggie left a successful career, which he'll share more about, to become the owner of Refresh and Etc. If that sounds familiar, for those of you who are on our social media channels, you know that about 2 years ago, I started taking my laundry in on a weekly basis to do wash and fold to save me some time and in turn save me some money. Well, Refresh and Etc. is the place that I go. And I'm supporting a friend when I do it. So this will be the first time you get to hear his voice on the podcast. So check it out. Reggie, welcome to the New Money, New Problems podcast.
What's up, B? Thanks for having me, man.
Oh yeah, for sure. By this point, if anybody in the community that's listening follows us on social media, they've heard your name or the name of your business several times, or they've seen me dropping off clothes trying to do better. But if you could tell me about your business.
Yeah. So I run a dry cleaning and laundry business. We have a couple of brick and mortar locations, one where we do kind of our dry cleaning operation, and then we also have a laundromat where we have self-service, of course, for customers, and then we handle all of our B2B clients there as well. So that's my day to day. And in addition to that, we clean sneakers, we clean other specialty items as well as just the traditional dry cleaning and laundry.
Well, as part of this series, we have been over the past month or so going through the stories and the methods of people who have done a mid-career pivot. They have achieved a certain level of success in a prior industry before making a decision to either temporarily or permanently leave that industry. And I know because I was there for the journey with your prior career, but if you could share with our audience what you got into before your current venture.
Sure, sure. So prior to me going down this path, I spent about 10 to 12 years working in corporate America in the healthcare industry, the hospital industries to be specific, where I worked multiple roles, whether it be in a facility or at a corporate office. Did a lot of things around implementation and project management, rolling out new technology, new education materials, et cetera. And so I did that for, like I said, about 12 years for one of the large hospital systems here in Nashville.
So we've been talking through this series about three main ways to enter or pivot into entrepreneurship with, subcategories of each of those ways. Those ways are first buying your own business. Or I should say buying an existing business, I should say. The second is starting a business from scratch.
Mm.
And then the third is franchise ownership. Which of the three did you choose and why?
Yeah, we acquired an existing business. The initial, I guess, decision to get into this was a real estate decision. We purchased a building that housed the dry cleaners over in North Nashville. And so, like I said, the initial play was to do the real estate. We then saw that the business was, it was in the middle of COVID, so things were slow, but there was a lot of opportunity. We had some loyal customers and things. So I saw the opportunity as, um, I guess I won't say a quick win, but there were some quick things that I could implement from my experience in this business that would turn things around. And truthfully, things did turn around pretty quickly in that first year, year and a half, just from doing just simple maintenance, customer experience, implementation, things like that. And so I felt that by acquiring a business, um, I won't say it's a shortcut, but it does allow you to already have a foundation in place. Like I mentioned, the customer base was already there. Some of the heavy machinery that can be very expensive was already purchased. Um, so just a lot of the operations and logistics were already in place. And so to me, it was again, a leveraged risk or leveraged bet to say, okay, well, I already have a lot of my pieces in place. Let's go ahead and try to see if we can turn this around and make this into take a kind of a classic business that's been around for years and ages, and then add a new modernized touch to the business. And so that's where we are now.
So it's been 3 years and there's been some expansions along that route. Tell me a little bit about your journey. Maybe like,
Yeah,
hey, this has been a pleasant surprise. This has been an unpleasant surprise, but what's the journey been like so far?
for sure, man. Yeah, it's it's been a blessing. It's been challenging at times, but I still love it every day, man. I get up and try to solve the next problem. So I would say that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned over these last couple of years is just really dive in and learn your business. Never assume that you have all the answers. You can take 10 years of corporate America and think you have all the answers, but that's not the case. So just really learn your industry, do your research, um, check out your competitors, see what they're doing, see how you can improve on that as well. But yeah, that's probably my biggest advice.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the wisdom. It's going to be a nice surprise for our audience. But I'm talking to Kevin and Leah later, so I'll be able to tie that thread of the relationship really between the four of us, but the unique thread that you all have from FH Jenkins to business owners. How about that?
For sure, man. For sure.
All right, that was my time with my friend Reggie. And in that interview, I alluded to the fact that he actually has entered into a joint venture where about a year ago, as they were looking to expand their operations, they were needing a place where they could do commercial size orders for laundry and wash and fold, and then also just have a place for residential, laundromat services. And they actually expanded by entering into a joint venture with, among others, two other longtime childhood friends of mine, Leah and Kevin Jennings. And Leah and Kevin brought their own experience from various industries into this partnership. And it's very interesting because I'm now looking at three people who I've known pretty much my entire life who have decided to enter into an industry together. So it's been really cool to see. So I will tell you a couple things about this interview. For one, I was trying to do this like in a seated place with good internet, and for various reasons, I ended up having to do it in my car, which has apparently the loudest engine of all time.
And then also in the editing process, something happened where whenever Kevin was talking, like my response in the editing process is right up on it. So I promise you, I am not as big of a jerk as I sound like in this interview. I typically try to let people finish their sentences a little better than this. I did not cut him off like it sounds, but it definitely sounds that way in the interview. That said, they provide some great answers. They're great people. And I think there's some wisdom in this interview, and I hope you enjoy it. Leah, Kevin, welcome to the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. A long-time listener, first-time guest.
You know, one of the cool things about this series that I actually haven't shared in the intro is that, you know, a good portion of these people that I am interviewing, I've known my entire life. So it's a pleasure to have you all on. So if you could start with telling us about your business.
Yeah, we own a full-service linen and garment cleaning company together with 3 other partners called Refresh and Etc. here based in Metro Nashville. And so we serve individuals, families, and organizations to help them really maximize the, I would say, the cleanliness, but more importantly, also the shelf life of their clothes, their linens. We serve businesses, hotels, but a lot of families here in Nashville.
We're focusing in this series on people who are not entrepreneurs fresh out of college. So if you all could share a little bit about your experience prior to joining Refresh.
Yeah, so I am currently a writer and editor for various organizations, and I also work in sponsorships and event management.
Yeah, for me, I am a brand strategist and business coach. That was starting out with me just doing as a marketer for different organizations, freelancing on the side until I went full time with that business. I guess at this point, almost 7 years ago. Even though I know it's proud. I'm proud of like, wow, 7 years, almost a decade.
It's been a long time.
And then we joined in the Refresh team back at the end of October of 2024.
Now, we have covered 3 main ways that people pivot into entrepreneurship, and there's subsets of each of those 3 ways. I know that each of you have started something from scratch prior to Refresh and etc. So what were your prior experiences like in business and creating businesses? And then how did you go about Refresh and etc. and why?
I would say that I entered into business and entrepreneurship unwillingly. I had never thought that this was something that I was going to pursue. I initially have always worked in corporate and public relations, and before public relations, I worked in the corporate setting as a newspaper reporter, a journalist, and then back in I think what was it, 2014, I became a contractor, a writing and editing contractor, when Kevin's job brought us to Georgia. And even then, it did not feel like something that I wanted to be in wholeheartedly. I still was constantly looking for full-time employment because I just always told myself that I was not an entrepreneur and that was Kevin's thing. But as the years have gone on, I'm now 11 years in, and I guess that I am an entrepreneur. I've been not in a full-time setting for almost 11 years, and so I have been writing and editing for myself full-time for over a decade, which is so crazy to say. But so I guess that I am an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for me, this is my first time owning a product or service that I'm not delivering at all. That no one knows who I am, no one knows my name, no one's buying because they think I'm good or whatever. It's like there's 1% what can the service do for them, and it's been really cool because I get to take all the abilities I've been using and developing as a freelancer, and with my own business, and actually apply it to something I have equity in, which is really exciting.
Now tell me this, of those 3 ways, and you kind of led into a little bit, you all bought into and really, expanded an existing business. So tell me Leah, a little bit about that journey in terms of, well, and this is actually even unique to the other people that we're interviewing. You're not buying into a business and then the owner leaves. You're buying in and expanding with the, current owner. So tell me a little bit about where you all were
Yeah.
in that decision process and how you went about doing it.
Well, I would say that it started off as me having financial goals and knowing that my money was directly in relation to the amount of hours and energy that I had and just basically my waking hours. I'm a writer and editor, so things that come to my desk, I can only work on them while I was awake. So I was hoping to diversify my income and have more passive income streams.
Passive.
Um, After buying into
I hate that word.
after oh listen, I thought it was passive, and Kevin is cracking up because it is not passive at all. The laundromat dry cleaning industry is not passive. However, I did say, you know, I wanted to either look into buying a laundromat, purchasing a parking lot, or a wedding venue, and the laundromat is the thing that opened up first. And at the time, that laundromat, our friend Reggie was interested in that laundromat as well. So we ended up going into a partnership and owning it together.
Now, well, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, for me on my side, sorry about that, Brenton. But on my side, um, my parents are going to retire, the next decade, and I don't know how much that will be voluntary, versus forced. And I would love to make sure, and by the grace of God, my wife's parents are still independent and doing their thing, and they retired a while ago. But they're also living their life, and I don't know how. I mean, they manage their money well, from my observation. Um, but money runs out. Some people outlive their retirements. Which, I mean, honestly, if that happens, I would do a backflip from joy that my in-laws outlive their retirement. And so that means I feel a certain level of responsibility and pressure, honestly, to create other streams of revenue that I don't need to take care of my family, but could also pad that opportunity for us. And so I think that for me was a big win. And so while I did not anticipate the laundromat being passive, so I never thought that, but I did think, and I still believe it's possible, right? I mean, we're in the early stages, so there are days that are harder than others. But I still believe it's possible that it may not be passive, but we are building an organization again that no customer is saying, I want Leah to write this for me. I need Kevin. And that's just very new for us. So that even the fact that we could say we could earn a portion of our money, and our time is not tied to the infrastructure of the business, which means we can leave town for a week like we just did on a vacation together and the company still runs. I mean, that in and of itself is new, honestly, for us. And that's just a really big opportunity that we're excited about developing.
I don't like the word passive income. I think it's a misnomer, but to your point, it can become passive income after a significant amount of sweat equity or actual equity has been put on the table. So that's why you all are laughing, because you're like, man, we working. I'm laughing because there's no such thing as passive income, but I understand.
Working.
So yeah, so I would ask
No.
you, and that may be the lesson that you've learned, but the journey is relatively fresh. But to this point, what lessons have you learned?
So many. How long is this podcast? I mean, we have learned so many things aside from the inner workings of a laundromat, the inner workings of a washer and a dryer, how to, open a lint trap. Those were never things that I myself, before I, bought into the fact that I thought that the dry cleaner was going to be a passive income situation. Um, those were not things that I was, you know, anticipating encountering. Just learning how a business that, I've never worked truly. I mean, in high school, I worked at a laundromat folding clothes for a company through my high school. But other than that, and other than folding my own clothes, I had no idea what, the laundromat or dry cleaners entailed. Um, but I'm learning so many things about partnership and what it looks like to work with others. I mean, I've worked on several teams writing things, but never have I worked in tandem with, 4 other people who have a way of doing business. And all of us think of things differently. And to be able to come together for the benefit of this business has been a challenge, but a good challenge because, we're learning and growing at the same time because none of us, except for, the two who were in the dry cleaning business before, have been in this industry before. So on that side of things, that is what I'm learning is what it is to be in a partnership and to, you know, be able to work a job and understand a job that I've not been in the industry for longer than what 100 days.
I don't know about you all, but it's been really cool to kind of watch that relationship come to fruition and see people that you've known since elementary school be in business together and growing an entity together. In this next interview, I'm actually interviewing a neighbor, my neighbor WP. WP moved onto our street a few years ago, shortly after we did, and his children play with my child. We've established a relationship that is growing over the past few months. And then when I actually started getting to know WP, he was in that valley of decision of whether to pivot into entrepreneurship. And he's just a really thoughtful guy that puts a lot of thought into the decisions that he makes. And I thought that you would appreciate his perspective of how and when he decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship and some of the lessons that he's learned along the way. I'll let him share more about the details of his business, but I hope you enjoy this interview with my neighbor and friend, WP. WP, welcome to the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Hey, Brenton. Good to be with you, man.
Oh, I appreciate you being on. I have shared to this point that we are in separate locations, but those locations are like 200 feet apart. so you asked if we could record in person. I was like, man, I don't have the cameras and stuff for that. So we can do it in our respective houses. But WP is my neighbor. We are becoming friends. Our kids play together, and it's been a pleasure meeting you and hearing more about your story. So we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the invite. I agree. I see you. I could probably look out this window and see you recording right now. So, but sometimes technology is more helpful than it used to be. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I gave the brief introduction, but in this series, we are talking about people who had a life before entrepreneurship. So if you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background that you brought prior to making that leap.
Sure. I spent probably the last decade or so working in different roles within tech. So early stage startups, usually Series A, sometimes earlier than that, always around product. So deciding what we build or how we build it or going about building it. So really trying to understand pretty deeply what the users want or the customers want and making sure we can get it to them in a scalable way. And then I had several great roles like that. I really got something from each of them and moved all across the country, get to live in other cities, states, and countries doing that. And then as that chapter started to close about this time last year, my wife and I sat around and were like, why not now? Because I've been talking about kind of the same topic you're hitting in this series of I grew up around a lot of small business folks in my family or my extended family. I kind of always wanted to run a Main Street business or run a business where it's easy to explain to my neighbors or my family members or people that I'm working to or selling to. And so then I started going down this path, and it's been quite a journey. If you fast, I can't believe it's already been a year basically since I kicked it off.
So I remember, and I'm sure, especially when it comes to conversations with your spouse, those conversations start far before you tell other people about them. But I remember us grabbing coffee, probably 15, 18 months ago. And you were telling me, here's what I really want to do. And I love it when people vocalize to others, here's a plan that I have, and then they later put that plan in motion. So you mentioned having people in your life that were entrepreneurs. Where were you in life when that itch really started to show up? Describe where you were in life when you're like, this is moving from something that I may do at some point in time to I'm thinking now might be the time.
I think some of it was circumstantial, meaning I was getting older. Like every year goes by, every job takes a few years of your journey. And I've got 2 little kids now that, I envision what life could be like if I can build it 5, 10, 20 years from now. But man, you got to get started at some point. And I kept thinking, like, if I go back and find, even if it's an amazing job with an amazing team solving cool problems, that's another tour of duty or, chunk of time that I'm not committing to starting this thing, whatever this thing is, because I didn't know at the time. I think with my wife's encouragement, and she's heard this, maybe a lot of people with their spouses or their friends or their partners, they've heard this thing a lot over the years. And so I think she was excited to see kind of a natural opening between one door closing and what is the next one, to say, it's not now or never, but it's getting there. At some point, I got to get started on where I want to be. So ultimately she gave me the confidence. I tried to manifest some of that confidence, even if I don't have it every day, to go for it. And again, I went down a journey of a path of like, what am I trying to get into? What type of businesses do I want to buy? What type of work do I want to do on a daily basis? And what are those characteristics? And we're not going to bore you with all that today, but it did lead to some interesting almosts, like almost got here with an acquisition, or almost got here with another seller, and then eventually made my way into the franchise that we can talk about today.
Yeah. You said something that I think is so profound when you talk about, I can go find the best job, but then you still have to go spend like a certain amount of time at that job. And then it's 2-3 years later and it's even harder. And a friend of mine that we are having on this episode, Reggie Coopwood, one of the things that I talked about with him is every time you get promoted, every time you find a better role, every year that your kids get older, it just becomes harder to take the pivot because you're walking away from more stuff, right? So I definitely understand where it's like, it's not necessarily, if not now, then never, but it is, if I don't do it now, it doesn't get easier to make that pivot, right?
that side of the ledger keeps building up, right? Like all of the opportunity costs of the career you've earned or you're continuing to earn, not just from a money perspective, but the respect and the skills and the network, like you're starting to build further and further into something. And even if you kind of like it, it doesn't mean you have to hate it. But even if you feel like you need to go in a different direction, or at some point always would, I got to say, I think it was my daughter, like just looking at her or talking to her about something silly at her, I don't know, something about school related projects or parents' day or something. It was just a simple thing like that just reminded me that, like, I don't want to tell her I never tried. Like maybe I hope I don't have to tell her I failed, but I at least don't want to tell her I didn't try. And so I think I combined all these narratives and stories that had probably been building for a long time at that right moment. And, I'd always wanted to run my own business and make I enjoy working across the business, so multidisciplinary decisions, but then having to live with some of those consequences of my decisions, and wanted that full responsibility. And I also just wanted to see what it was like to live where I work and work where I live. A lot of problems I've been solving for the last, whether it was in consulting, which I skipped that part of my career, but consulting, strategy and operations consulting, and then working in startups mostly, or investing in startups also. All that work never seemed to impact people around me, my community, not in a bad way. It's just I'm solving problems for a customer across the country, across the world, or my office is based in a different state when I was first moved back to Tennessee. So I got excited a little bit about finding an opportunity to spend time with people in and around Nashville, for example, with the work that I do. And that comes with some pluses and minuses. I haven't been in a job that's so location dependent in years. And so I'm learning some of that as well. So start learning more about that, I guess, as well.
We have talked about 3 main ways of pivoting into entrepreneurship. If you could share the journey of the things that you considered, and then what did you land on?
Okay, yeah, this is good. I've listened to some of the others in the series, so I know there's also that 4th category, right, which is acquire an existing franchise. I think your last guest or a couple of guests ago, he had knocked that out. So I started with the premise that, like, I love solving problems and learning more about that end user and what they need and what I'm offering or building, or in this case now selling. So as long as there's always that opportunity, I can be pretty engaged. I started thinking, I fell pretty deeply into acquisition entrepreneurship as a path for me, because I've been waiting for years, like I mentioned earlier, years and years to have my idea that just had to get done, because I've worked in startups with other founders who came up with pretty unique approaches to solving a problem, and they just had to run after it. And I joined them on some of those journeys. It's like I kept waiting to like have my little aha moment of like, this has to be brought to life, and I can do it. And it never came, or it hasn't yet come. And so as the more I read, first it was buy then build, then I skimmed the HBR guide, started to read a lot more online, joined other conversations that were happening or communities wherever I could find them. I ended up even joining the acquisition lab over there with Walker and Chelsea, and got to know other searchers and learn alongside them and Walker's team. It was so obvious to me that's a great choice, because at least from my background, like getting able to join something that's an operating concern, a going concern, and find ways to improve it based on a really smart group of people that are already there having some success. I don't want to go too far down that path because you've talked about it, and I ultimately didn't. It's not where I ended up this time. I started looking at that probably around. I started this whole journey like March, April of 2024, and I would say I joined the lab in about May. And then later in the summer, after having a few near misses, like I was saying, I kind of got a little deep with this one seller, didn't work out. Same thing with another for a different reason, either for me or for them. And as the time started going, I was like, again, it's not like now or never, but at some point, maybe I should broaden my aperture of what I'm considering, because I had never wanted to I never wanted to own a franchise. I always felt like they were too business in a box or limiting, or I wanted to have more creative control or freedom to make certain decisions all the time, even with the downsides. And I wanted a chance to, write my own SOPs, not just follow them. And so I was pretty much turned off of those for the first several months, 5 or 6 months. And then later in the summer, when a couple of things came and went, I was like, all right, maybe you're wrong about a lot of things, but at least one of those things could be this. And so I started reading more and expanding out. And I got to say, once you start if you open yourself up to franchises, just like I think one of your guests recently is a franchise consultant. They're very good at their jobs in both finding you, connecting you, getting everybody understood, helping everybody understand like what's at stake here or what's a good fit. But I think it's interesting because it's more of you're being sold to as well, right? Once you raise your hand, it's like, oh, we'll find you. Franchises and franchisors are going to try to find you to find the right match. And so that definitely picked up the deal flow. As soon as I raised my hand, being kind of interested in a different model, whether it's an acquisition or starting a new territory, I got a lot more inbound kind of coming my way. And so I started evaluating those and ultimately narrowed it down. To finally answer your question, after I got down to like 3 to 5 kind of options that felt pretty good. I ended up landing on Go Painting. So I currently run a commercial painting business that serves the multifamily apartments and HOA communities, retail spaces, office buildings, industrial facilities, and even some special purpose facilities like, churches, arenas, stadiums, libraries, schools, that kind of thing. So it's B2B, which is part of my background is B2B anyway, but it's definitely a different set of skills needed to kick this off in a new market.
What was the first day you had in this journey where you were laying your head on the pillow that night and you said, this was a good day of entrepreneurship? What was that moment?
I feel like I should be able to remember these because they're fewer than the others so far. But this job allows me to get out and talk to a lot of people in the community, stakeholders I would have never spent a lot of time with across different management companies who own these properties and manage them, the maintenance teams who work on them, and sometimes we partner with them if we're kind of supplementing what they handle on their own. I'm relatively introverted. I guess on the spectrum, I'm always like just across the halfway line towards introverted versus extroverted. So I can definitely tell that I need to recharge every now and then, but I still have days where I've spoken with a lot of different types of people, felt like I've connected them with, even if I can't solve their problem, I knew of a person who I just met, and I can connect those people over. I can connect them over, LinkedIn or email or text. I feel like when I've been able to make a few people's day a little bit easier just by being out doing what I'm trying to do, which is get to know them, figure out what their life and what their challenges are and how I can maybe fit them or somebody I know can help solve them. It's that sort of being out and about in my truck and meeting them and spending some time in their world that seems to fill me up a little bit better. It kind of cuts both ways. I guess the two things that I've noticed are, and they're kind of at opposite ends. I do feel pretty energized after a good day of meeting new people, especially the ones who are happy to meet you that day. People who are you're not meeting them at the worst time ever in their day or their week. Those always feel a lot better. They're a little more life affirming. And then, to be honest, sometimes I work at my computer. I told you I've been a tech worker for a decade. So every now and then I'll spend a Monday or a Friday or part of those days at a co-working space down the street or here at my desk and just like breathe. Cause I'm like, oh, this is easy. Like this part's easy. This part should be easy. So, I can tell the things that as I earn the right to hire more team members who, again, they're going to be better at me at each of these functions than hopefully I am today. As I earn my way towards that opportunity, I get kind of excited because I can tell there are certain parts of the business where it just comes more naturally, gives me more energy versus drains more energy. And if I can partner with the right people in my business and create something together, I'm pretty sure it's going to go further, faster, and more efficiently than me just kind of blocking and tackling on all fronts. And so I have these little glimmers of like realizing certain activities give me energy, and kind of getting excited for the day when I can spend more of my time optimized on those things probably than on the full spectrum.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview, and it is time to bring this thing on home with the last, but certainly not the least interview. These are two friends of mine, Tony Phillips and Elizabeth Carroll. Liz and I, she'll share a bit more about how we met each other in their interview, but Liz and I became friends first. And when she married her husband, Tony, got to know Tony, who's a wonderful human being. They've really appreciated their friendship over the years, even as they have moved and come back to Nashville. And to me, what's interesting about this journey, I don't want to spill the beans a little bit, but this is the first person, I'll let them share who, they were interviewing who decided to go into entrepreneurship and then actually enter back into their original industry. And to me, it's a really unique story in terms of how they as a family have navigated entrepreneurship and how, as we've talked about this, we've kind of operated under the assumption that you have to be an entrepreneur forever, when in reality, sometimes it is just the break that you need or the pivot that you need or the addition to your portfolio that you need to be able to go back into your original industry with renewed energy, a renewed sense of purpose. So I think you'll appreciate this one. And that's why I left it for last, because it's a bit different from the ones that we've carried in the past or shared in the past. But I think you'll appreciate their experience. Please tune in to Liz and Tony. Tony, Liz, welcome to the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I mentioned a little bit about kind of what you all are doing now, but I didn't get into like how we know each other. So Liz, start us off. Go way back to when we met, and I was introduced to this wonderful couple.
Well, once upon a time, you and I were young emerging leaders, and we were a part of the Nashville Emerging Leaders class of 2014. And that's how we initially met. And then I think we were on like a committee together. But since then, I don't know, we've just remained friends and stayed connected. And you and your wife came to our wedding, which was, gosh, almost 9 years ago, which is kind of crazy.
I was telling you both, she still talks about that. She's like, that was just such a nice, fun day. And I was like, yeah, it was.
Good. That's what we wanted.
That's what we wanted, yeah.
Well, if you could, and since Liz, you started us off, Tony, if you could pick it up with, tell us a little bit about each of your careers from the outset or leading up into your foray into entrepreneurship.
Okay, Liz is an HR professional. She got into human resources originally in the hotel business, which is still what I do today.
I like to say I was smart and I got out.
I always say she is the smart one, but I've been in the hospitality industry for quite a long time, and really had my dream job running a large resort in San Diego, California, as we entered into this season of entrepreneurship and buying a franchise.
Okay. And Liz, I know that you started in hospitality, but you've done several things in a similar vein while we've known each other. So share a bit about some of those ventures.
Yeah, I started out in HR, but I guess when you and I met, I was working in nonprofit, did some program management for a little while. But after that, went back to HR. So, I mean, that's really been mostly what I've done over the years. When Tony was kind of travel or having to relocate for his hospitality career, I just kept my job. I was in tech at the time, working in Nashville. So we kind of, I like to say we never really left Nashville. We were always still connected here. But yeah, when yeah, he kind of left this part out, but he got kind of burnt out due to COVID, especially in California. And so at that time, so that was 2021, my job was still here in Nashville. And I said, yeah, take a breather, take a break. We can't afford to live on just one salary in San Diego. So came back to Nashville and yeah, started exploring franchises.
So you make the decision to come back to Nashville, and entrepreneurship is now on the table. In this series, we've talked about three main ways of entering into entrepreneurship. So Liz, could you tell me, did you start with franchise ownership at the outset, or was it, no, we went through all three of those options and here's how we landed on franchising?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a decision for both of us, but Tony was really leading it just because I still had like a full-time corporate job, and I'm like, hey, this is kind of your thing. But, you know, we definitely were making the decision together. And I think, so one thing that Tony loves is food and beverage. So, like, he had looked into buying an existing restaurant. That was one thing that he had looked into. And he actually took a good, like, 6 months just to kind of, as he said, kind of take that time and do therapy and just like rest for a little bit, but also to kind of have space to get some creative juices flowing. So, I mean, that's definitely something that was discussed. I don't think we ever talked about having, starting a business from the ground up. I think it was mostly like buying something existing. But we ended up meeting with a franchise consultant from FranNet, and he mostly met with Tony, but one thing that he said is, don't think about what you already know, but connect with an existing franchise or connect with a franchise that you align with when it comes to like culture and values and that kind of thing. And really just kind of we narrowed it down to seven, and ended up landing on Everline, not because we were super excited about asphalt or pavement maintenance, but it was really the leadership at Everline and their values and driven principles. That's really what made us make that choice ultimately.
And Tony, share a little bit more about Everline in general, because Liz and I actually had coffee right around this time,
Okay.
and she was telling me like, "Oh,
Yeah.
Tony's all into it. He's doing this, he's doing that," and I was like, "I have to
Right.
acknowledge, I don't think I've ever seen Tony not in a suit, like not just a suit, a really really nice suit." so,
uh,
so I would tell me a little bit about the business, the makeup of it. Tell me more.
Coming from the best dressed man in Nashville, that's a compliment. So thank you, Brenton. I have seen that you had somebody from FranNet on the podcast, and Leslie spoke about what I'll call corporate refugees, which is what I was, where we wanted a company that offered marketing, lead generation, systems, uh, processes. We, as Liz referred to, we don't know anything or didn't know anything about asphalt at the time, um, but the values of Everline aligned with who we are and the type of business we want to be associated with, and that's really what attracted us to Everline. They at the time were launched in Canada, very successful in Canada, but we were one of the early adopters in the US. and I think probably took a risk just because everything did align the way we wanted it to. And at this point, Everline has well over 100 locations in the US. It's one of the fastest growing franchises in the country. We've gone to an annual conference with Everline for the last 3 years. And in scale, it's doubled or tripled in terms of the attendance, but the commitment to excellence and using the systems and the processes that they taught us on day one still exist, and so that's why we're part of it.
Well, you all have lived out what Leslie Cuban from FranNet said, which is, Liz said, Tony was involved in the meetings, but Leslie said, well, yeah, but when you do it, the whole family kind of ends up running
That's
the
right.
business.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
there has been an interesting part, which I alluded to before introducing to you, but I'm revealing now. And that is, Tony, you are actually back in the hotel business. And Liz, tell us a little bit, because it seems like you are kind of running Everline. So tell me about that transition.
Oh gosh, I there were a few different things I think that kind of caused that transition, but I think the biggest one is, Tony was interested in returning to the hotel business. He was able to start working with a company, and the last company that he was with for many, many years was very good to him, very good to us. But I think he was looking for something different. And the company that he's with now, and now he's managing Bobby Hotel, is really just kind of gives him a little bit more creative freedom. And interrupt me if I'm wrong. This is kind of my view of it, but so anyway, he saw that opportunity, and I had not long before that. So that our transition happened about a year ago, where I took over. Um, about a year before that, I had started a career coaching business. So I had left, my corporate job as well, and actually still have that career coaching business. Everline's taken up a lot of my time, but I still do some of that and HR consulting and that kind of thing. But um, it was just time for somebody else to take over as he went to Bobby Hotel. So I jumped in. And so it was helpful to have seen him running it for the 2 years prior to that. I think what was hard was jumping into the business when like it was actively running. It's not like I was, starting it up from scratch like he did. We just kind of made that transition and I jumped in and we had a staff and that was hard, but so it's been over a year now since I've taken over, and I love it. Like I'm amazed. My friends make fun of me for how much I talk about asphalt and like the science behind it, and they're like, "Can we please talk about something other than parking lots?" But yeah, it's been really fun and challenging in a lot of good ways. So yeah, definitely stretching myself, but it's been good.
So looking back at it all, making a very big decision to transition out or take a break from and all of the different, twists and turns. Give me one thing that has surprised you in a negative manner. We'll get that out the way first. And then what's been a pleasant surprise throughout this journey?
Do you have
I'll speak.
something?
I'll take the
Okay.
negative because I think it probably hit me first. I was running the franchise at the time, and you get as much information as is legally possible from the franchisor, and you make your best guess in terms of financial assumptions and forecasting, budgeting, all of things I'm very familiar with from the hospitality business. But things don't always go the way you plan, and we found ourselves in need of cash. And one of the surprises we ran into is that two people that have just become entrepreneurs that don't have a day job aren't going to get cash for their business that's less than a year old. Um, Nobody taught us that at entrepreneur school because we didn't go to one. But it was a very important learning lesson in this journey.
So Liz, I guess you're
Yeah.
tasked with the positive. What's been the pleasant
I like to
surprise?
think that's good. Oh my gosh. You know, I think the pleasant surprise, I think when you're starting out in a business, and a lot of times this happens when you're starting a franchise or you're a new franchise owner, a lot of times you don't know anything about the subject matter. And I think what I've been pleasantly surprised by is how much your skills transfer. And it's funny because, as also a career coach, I'm always telling people that, like, you can take your skills and they will transfer to another career, but easier to I don't know, give the advice than take it, I guess. But yeah, I've been amazed at how much, I've taken from my previous career and have used it in a pavement maintenance business. So that's been really good.
Oh, good. Well, this is exactly
Yeah.
what I hoped it would be. Two cool people talking about a very cool experience. So I appreciate both of you for your time, for your friendship, and thank you for being a guest on the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Thanks again for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, this was the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen.